Andrea before, my presentation style is quite informal. So I am very conversational in this. So obviously I think we're gonna wait towards the end of the presentation to address any questions, but I look forward to talking to everyone and hearing what questions they have about the presentation and in space in general. So you can switch to the next one if you'd like. Next slide. Perfect. So I reviewed this already a little bit about my practice. That on the picture is Happy is the brown horse and Scotty is the white and brown horse. My office in Kirtland is actually on a farm. It's very peaceful, very beautiful, very different than my standard Beechwood office. But I always like to give a plug for my horses. So we have 4 horses at the farm area. So those are 2 of our sweet horses. And that's how you can call me and email me, and that's my website there too. So if there are things tonight that we aren't necessarily able to address, I'm always happy to talk as well offline. So you can go on to the next presentation or next slide. So space. What exactly is space? And what brought me to space was I was encountering a lot of families, very, very, very dedicated parents that were saying to me a multitude of different things. One of which was, my child is refusing therapy. What do I do? Or my child is in therapy and I'm going to meetings, but I'm feeling like I need something else. What else can I do? And so I searched out there and I came across SPACE. So SPACE stands for Supportive Parenting for Anxious Childhood Emotions. And it is a wonderful therapeutic technique that is somewhat new out of Yale. And SPACE is parent only. So when you are engaging in a SPACE session, and when you use the term SPACE, it would be the same as saying something like cognitive behavioral therapy. It's just a funny name. When I tell people I do space therapy, they're like, you're an astronaut? Like what is going on? So it's just a very fun name, but you can put a placeholder in like CBT or DBT. But SPACE is it's a 8 to 12 week manual based parent only session. So it's when you see something that says manual based, manualized, it's pretty prescribed. And part of that is there's a large psychoeducation component to it that is very necessary in understanding your child's anxiety and understanding the interactions between your child's anxiety and being a parent, and what influences that may or may not be occurring as a result of trying to help your child manage their anxiety. So when we look at SPACE, our goal is to decrease family accommodation. And accommodation is a word that's going to come up quite often during this talk, and we'll get to what actually accommodation means in this sense. I know accommodation can mean a multitude of different things, especially within the IEP or 504 realm, but it is decreasing family accommodation of a child's anxiety to better parental support by learning to implement particular tools and strategies based on the child's needs. And when we decrease this accommodation, an emphasis is placed on the following strategies. So we cultivate a supportive role of parents. And in a few slides, we'll talk a little bit more on what exactly is a supportive role. We are restoring our child's autonomy. We're restoring their independence and their ability to function in something that is producing anxiety for them. We're improving their self-regulation and coping. And this is done indirectly because remember, I am working with the parent. I'm not working with the child in this setting. We are developing a supportive community. Community. We have a village, and it is so important to embrace our village. We are improving collaboration and communication among family. And this is all done from a unilateral standpoint with unilateral parental action. And we'll talk a little bit more too on what exactly is unilateral parental action. And we are going to be looking to minimize escalation. So with space, the concept of space is really based off of passive resistance. And when you think about it, and you think about behavior, and you think about motivation for change, and you think about changing someone else's behavior, when it comes down to it, you really only can change your own behavior. You can pick up your child, you can move them from room to room, you can strongly encourage, you can provide them with tools, but me here and another person here, I can't force someone else to change. You can only change your own actions. And that is sort of the underpinning when we are conceptualizing this space. And it is, again, thinking about the passive, a lot of it is based off of passive resistance. I can't force you to do something. I can only change myself. And that is what I know I have 100% control over. So can we go to the next slide? Perfect. So why parents? Why parents? Why are we focusing on parents? Why are we not focusing on the child? The child is the one with the anxiety. Why are we sitting down with the parents? So this is the study, and I have all the information up here if you care to research it, that this theoretical, this therapeutic technique was based off of. So in a nutshell, what the researchers did was they looked at cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and they looked at space therapy. And they wanted to see, how do children fare? How do children do when they're engaging in cognitive behavioral therapy? And then when we go and we compare it to what are the results of the impact on the child when they're engaged, when the parents are only engaging in space. So we've got children engaging in CBT, doing the hard work, doing their homework, following through on things, and then a separate group where only the parents are engaging in space therapy. And what they saw was children that engaged in space, and then the children of the parents that engaged, children that were engaging in CBT, and then children that were engaging in space therapy had similar outcomes. So what does this tell us? This basically tells us that you can indirectly impact the anxiety, your child's anxiety, by helping parents look at the parent-child dynamic in a different light. And what is really important to emphasize, and when we're working with parents, we're not blaming parents. There's like absolute is the opposite of that. And it's a common conversation I will have. And I will commonly say to parents, you're doing nothing wrong. And the fact that we are even having this conversation shows how well-intended and how wonderful of a parent you are, that we are even having this dialogue. But what we can do is we can go, okay, this is your child. This is how your child reacts to certain things. Let's adjust certain things in the way that you're reacting to your child's anxiety to benefit your child. And so why this study was so important was there hasn't been any other studies out there or any other therapeutic techniques that didn't necessarily train the parent to be what we would consider a lay therapist. So you're on the ground, you are helping them to process through anxiety. This study said, okay, there's anxiety that's going on, and we're going to essentially remove the parent from that dynamic. I think we can move on to the next slide on that one. So, what is anxiety? Anxiety is adaptive, and when we think about anxiety being adaptive, we all have anxiety. If we didn't have anxiety, we would have gotten eaten by dinosaurs way back when, because anxiety was what kept us alive. You would see a saber-toothed tiger and you would get this massive surge of adrenaline, and blood would pump to certain muscles, and you could see better, you can hear better, and that's what helped you to survive in a time when there was danger all around us. And anxiety is healthy, and it is a necessary component of a child's psyche, which is something we really have to, which is something really important to remember, and remind your child too, because anxiety tends to be pathologized, but it is adaptive and it is a necessary part of a child's, a child's psyche. Where anxiety breaks off into two categories is when we start to see anxiety and anxiety disorder. And in an anxiety disorder, we see children experience exaggerated, and that's the key piece, an exaggerated anxiety relating to things or situations that do not necessarily pose a real danger. So a certain word, a spider, a color, ordering food in a restaurant. And we see this big, big, big surge of adrenaline in response to a seemingly low level stimulus. And the difference between children with an anxiety disorder and just other children in general that are upset about something is we see children that have anxiety disorders continuously try to avoid you, because it is what we do when something is anxiety provoking to us. We try to avoid it, and that's when the pattern starts coming in, and we see anxiety provoking stimulus, run away and avoid. But when we're running away and avoiding, when it is something that doesn't pose real danger and it starts impacting us in various domains, that's when we start to see a real problem. So we see it in domains of separation. Mom and dad can't leave. Socialization. I can't order food in a restaurant. OCD. If I don't touch the light switch 4 times and then go back to the bathroom, flush the toilet, then go back and touch the light switch, then wash my hands 5 times, something bad is going to happen. Panic disorders. The complete falling down panic disorder. Generalized anxiety, everything is you're vibrating at a higher level. Things, large startle response, everything is a big reaction, and overall phobias. So we can go on to the next slide. Have a drink of water. Okay, so personal boundaries, and this is where we're going to start to see where the parent piece plays into this and into space. So anxiety makes it harder for a child to function as an independent individual. When your child is encountering an anxiety-provoking situation and they're running away from a situation, and parents, very, very, very well-intended, very, very kind, coming from the deepest recesses of your heart, will try to jump in and make that situation better for your child. And so what ends up happening is you start to see a little bit, little by little, lack of independence in that child and reliance on parents to help them maintain that balance, help them to maintain that decrease in anxiety. And then that leads to a lack of separateness and a blurred boundary between the child and the parent. So then the child becomes reliant on the parent to help them not be anxious. I need mom next to me to do my homework. I need mom to stand outside of to sit next to the bathtub. I need mom to order food for me in a restaurant because I just can't do it. And when mom jumps in and goes, all right, I know this is going to provide you some anxiety. I'm going to help you. We're going to get through this. That's when we start seeing that blurring. And that's when we start to see where we're going to talk a little bit more about accommodation. So I want you to think about this for a second. I want you to think about, certain situations. Like, can you think of a way in which your child's anxiety has impacted your personal boundaries? And personal boundaries can be, there's a wide range of personal boundaries. Do you feel like your time is taken over by your child's fears? How much time do you think are you, or not even physically active, physically helping them, or just processing through, okay, tomorrow's Tuesday. I know they have music. Music is really overwhelming. I need to think about going through this, and this for them to make sure that their day is fine. I need to pack their instrument, but their instrument has to be in the car in this angle. If it's not okay. Are there things that you would do for your child that they normally should be able to do for themselves? And do you feel like your child is less independent than you would expect? Do you have a teenager that you need to cut their food because they're fearful of knives? Do you have a teenager who can't go to sports lessons, that you're in the parking lot and you're going to always cancel the sports lesson because they're feeling anxious? And then the other thing is, how does your child's anxiety impact you emotionally? And what we see is, some parents feel that by reassuring your child, at all, you are decreasing their ability to be self-sufficient. So we've got, various areas, and people fall on various on opposite ends. So you've got parents that are like, if I reassure my child and help them, I'm doing them a disservice. Or parents that feel like, I can't not help them, because if I don't help them, I'm doing a disservice. And where do we fall in that middle area? So I think we can move on to the next one. So accommodation. So accommodation is something that I was talking about earlier. And accommodation is our action, our involvement in our child's anxiety. So that is the, in the next slide, I'll go through some examples, but that is what we are doing to help our child reduce their own anxiety. Not allowing our child to attempt themselves to sit in a little discomfort and reduce their own anxiety and figure out what works for them, but it is us jumping in. And what we see is this cycle of accommodation. So we see at the very top of it, distress related to a disorder. We see a family accommodation. We see a short-term reduction in this distress. So it feels nice. Okay, mom ordered food for me at the restaurant. Okay, I can breathe again. I'm fine. I can breathe again. But then we end up with some continued dependence on parents for regulation. So what happens anytime you end up at a restaurant? You're going to need your mom to order your food, because you haven't had the experience of actually ordering the food and figuring out, okay, I can be a little sweaty, my voice may crack for a second, I may stumble through my words, but I'm going to be okay in ordering the food, which then leads to maintenance of symptoms. And what we see is a reduction in accommodation to anxiety restores independence versus being self-serving or harsh. And the conversation commonly ends up as, if I don't step in, I can't not step in, I'm being harsh, or I'm being self-serving. How can I sit there and let my child experience this anxiety? And what we have to do is switch from relying on parents to allowing them to rely on themselves and restoring their independence, which is the trickle down effect of that is just profound. So we can go on to the next slide. So here are some examples of accommodation. And when I realize there are a lot on here, but I feel like this is really helpful to really kind of, I'm going to go through the whole list, just because in meeting with families and engaging in space, sometimes certain things on here aren't necessarily perceived as being an accommodation to anxiety, but they actually are. So, this is just a short amount of various accommodations. So speaking in place of a child with social anxiety, sleeping next to a child who fears being in bed alone, writing notes excusing a child from speaking in a class or participating in other school behaviors, answering questions related to a child's persistent worry, providing the child with information about parents' schedules and plans, repetitive or overly rigid nighttime rituals, reassuring a child that they have not done wrong, not bringing home books or movies with anxiety-provoking stimuli, refraining from using certain words, swearing or promising that certain things will happen, taking a child to unnecessary medical appointments, leaving the lights on, doing homework instead of the child because it produces anxiety, accompanying a child to part of the house because they fear approaching it alone. So, take a second and think about this. If you, my guess is because you're here listening that you've got either an anxious child or someone or a child that you love and is dear to you that has some anxiety. So if you think about it for a second, think through your day and see, are there things on here that you didn't necessarily go, I didn't realize that's accommodating. That's accommodation. That is something that we're doing that may not be allowing them to rely on themselves and restoring some autonomy. So we can go on to the next one. So parental support. So what do we do now? We are saying, okay, I can't help my child. I need to rethink how I'm interacting. I really need to rethink how I am stepping in or not stepping in with their anxiety. So what kind of support do I offer? And we often group these into statements that parents are making into protective statements or demanding statements. And so like a protective statement would be something like, she just can't handle stress. She just can't. She can't, and I know. Anxiety could hurt or traumatize them. I don't want them to sit in a little discomfort. It's going to traumatize them. And it is my job as a parent to protect. And these are all very valid statements. I'm a mom. I get it that I can't, the thought of letting my daughter sit in some discomfort is painful to think of. But I will get to the next section of how to support with support, but there are other ways. And then we would get to more of the demanding half of it. So we've got the protective, I can't let anything happen. And the demanding part would be, it's not frightening. I'm not afraid of it. You shouldn't be afraid of it. You're just doing this for attention. You can do it. Come on, your sister does it. Why are you doing? You can't do it. You're fine. You're fine. So when we're phrasing it like that, your child is anxious. They're coming to you, and we're often ending up in two different categories. What we have to do is form a supportive statement. So we see an acceptance and a legitimization of a child's fear, plus, and this is the biggest part, plus belief that they can handle it. And that's where we get to support. So that can be, and it's funny, whenever I talk about this, I'll never forget when I was trained in this, the presenters referred to this as the macaroni and cheese. You can't have macaroni and cheese without the noodles and the cheese. So it is the acceptance and the belief part. So when your child is sitting in front of you and they're afraid to go into the other room, and you say, your sister just went in there, or okay, I'm going to go in there with you. Those are, you have to find a combination. So you look at it, go, I realize going in the dark makes you really nervous, but I know you can do it. And reframing your way of responding to your child when they come to you with something that is making them anxious, and saying, I get it. I know that this makes you anxious, but I also believe in you and I know you can handle it. It shifts things around. So you can go to and then there's just some examples of, taking from, it's not frightened to it scared you, but I'm sure you'll be okay. So we can go on to the next slide. So all of that was really important groundwork and foundation in order to then be able to start targeting the problems. If we don't have a good psychoeducation, a good framework on what is anxiety, what are parental supports, what is accommodation, when we start actually implementing these tools or these steps, these very unilateral steps, we're gonna, it needs to have a little bit more meaning. So what we end up doing quite often in space is we choose a target problem, and we want it to be accommodation oriented. So one of the things that we've discussed before, so something that you are involved in. It shouldn't be something like, oh, in school my son or my daughter isn't talking because you're not in school. That's a teacher-school problem. But if they're not talking to I keep going back to the waiter in a restaurant. If they're not talking to a waiter in a restaurant and you're there, then that is something that you're with them. It needs to be more of a significant problem and impacting day-to-day functioning and often a parent's ability to pursue their agenda. We want it to be, we want you to have some motivation in this change, a recurrent problem, not just a one-timer, like when grandma comes for Christmas, they melt down because it's only one day a year. Motivated to address it. Mom and dad, or mom or dad, whoever, parents need to be motivated to address this and avoiding non-anxiety related problems. I think that was it. I was like looking at my notes. I feel like I had something else to say about that, and I think I said it. So we can go on to the next one. So how it works is once you choose a problem, once you choose a target accommodation, you provide a very formal announcement to your child. And it seems very bizarre and very opposite that how things normally, how you normally will interact with your child. And the reason for a formal announcement is there's multiple reasons. One, it is informing the intent for change. So you have already previously targeted an accommodation, and you have chosen what you're going to do, what you're going to either do or not do, and you need to make sure that your child knows. You're not asking for input, but you're letting them know, this is what I am going to be doing. If you're asking for input, then you're diving into an accommodation. It is a very unilateral decision at this point. And the other thing too is if you're saying to them, okay, we're gonna start addressing your anxiety. I know that homework makes you really anxious. Let me know when you're ready to address it. You're putting the burden on that change. You're putting the burden of change on them. So what you were doing is you were taking that off of them and going, okay, we're gonna, instead of having me check your homework 5 times during the duration of your homework, we're gonna check it once at the end, and then we're gonna be done. Or however you're gonna choose to format your modification of that accommodation. And also the other part is it conveys your message precisely and concisely. Because when you're sitting in front of your child, they pull at your heartstrings. It's very normal. You don't want to see your child, if you're telling them, I'm no longer going to be doing such and such behavior for you, to see them upset. So it is very, very formal. So it is a brief message stating determination to begin the process of change. And again, the purpose is to inform your child in a clear, resolute way of your intent to address the target problem. And overall, just some tips. If it is a 2-parent household, when you're delivering the message, if possible, having both parents present. It is not uncommon, and it is not an issue whatsoever if mom is on board and dad is not. There are some hurdles to overcome, but it is not, we do not have to have a kumbaya, peace, love, mom and dad totally agree on everything dynamic in order for this to work. The announcement, again, as I was saying, is unilateral action of the parents. We're not asking for that child, what do you think would be helpful for us to reduce? It is that decision that has been made. And again, as I was saying before, it is delivered in a very formal manner, in a message from the heart. So we go on to the next one. So dealing with the reaction to the announcement. So I'm sure everyone's like, okay, that sounds real, real nice, Beth. Like, okay, I chose a problem, and now I'm going to make a change, and then you think I'm going to tell my child that that's not, we're going to make a change, and then everything is going to be fine. So there's, within this therapeutic technique, there's a larger conversation, one that we don't necessarily have enough time to delve into it in this setting, but there's a larger conversation on the dealing with the response to the announcement. So it is not uncommon at all to hear an argument, a debate, emotional blackmail, indifference, ignoring, scorn, aggressive behavior, and overall distress. And what I tell parents to respond back to their child, or how to respond back to their child when there is this strong response, is often with very canned expression. So, one that I will tell often is, we have told you what we meant to say, and now we will be thinking about what to do next. We are not going to talk about it anymore right now. And the "we are not going to talk about it anymore right now" is very important, because if you do talk about it, and you are engaging in the accommodation, you are talking, you are negotiating. That's not how it is. When we go think back to the very beginning of this, you can't force anyone else to change their own behavior. You can only change your own. And so what you are showing to them is you are showing them self-control, and you are disengaging in unproductive dialogue. You're modeling for them the behaviors that you want them to be able to engage in. And the other part is thinking about supporters. So it is so important to have your village around you. And so depending on your child's reaction to the announcement, sometimes it is very important to bring in other people into this dynamic. So trusted people. If your child is aggressive in response to this, sometimes, and initially, I'm going to give a disclaimer with this. Initially, I was like, huh? When I heard the suggestion for this, but sometimes if you've got, an uncle or a neighbor, and you give your child the response, or you convey the message to your child, and their response is they come at you and they're hitting you and they're kicking you. You can have a trusted family member call and say, the next day, hey, I heard that, there was some unsafe behavior going on. I know that things make you feel anxious, and I know you can keep yourself safe. Because what ends up happening is it starts to become this family secret. It's a family secret, and then what ends up happening is it just continues, and it's perpetuated, and it continues, and there's no change that's occurring. And we don't want to, it's never done in a way we're not embarrassing our child. We are not doing it to, humiliate them. But what we are saying is your behavior is not acceptable, and how you're conducting it's not going to be our family secret. And we're not going to continue this behavior. And we've got a village that's no one is thinking poorly of you, but your uncle may know, or your aunt may know, and we're going to make changes. And it's very powerful when that secret is no longer a secret, when it is unearthed, if you will. So we can go on to the next one. So to make this all sort of come together, I thought I would give an example. So of patient Adam, and when first met with Adam, I had the parents go through and discuss certain accommodations. So for example, parents had to go upstairs with Adam to get him dressed every morning. Mom had to pick him up, make sure he was first in line. She had to be in eyesight at all baseball practices. She had to announce when she went from room to room. Parents would wait for him to finish playing before he went upstairs to get younger sibling ready for bed. He needed to be in the bathroom when he showered. He woke up in the middle of the night. He had to go back into his bed. And they had to make sure that one parent was always at home. Parents never could go out together. So we looked through the various accommodations in their day, and what we determined was that we were going to start with having parents super close to him at all times. So this is the letter, the proclamation, if you will, from parents to him on the changes. So, dear Adam, we love you so much and are very proud of the way that you've been handling everything this past year. We also see that sometimes it's hard for you when you're not very close to us. We now realize that our behavior so far, for instance, making sure you always know exactly where we are and staying close to you all the time, is not helping you. We think it's actually making things worse because we are not giving you the chance to see that you actually can be alone sometimes. That's why we've decided that from now on, when we are home, we will not try to stay close to you, and we will not announce where we are. We promise that we will not leave the house without telling you. We will also not accompany you to the bathroom, and we will close the door when we go. This might sound hard at first, but we are 100% sure that you can handle it. We are not angry at you and not trying to punish you. We simply care too much to allow your worries to hurt you in this way. We are always here for you, but our help can't be by giving into your fears. We love you. So that's sort of an example of tying in everything. And so what ended up happening, he was not happy when they got the letter, when they talked to him. He, I think if I'm correct, tore up the letter, ran up to his room, didn't talk to them for the rest of the night, was crying in his room. And mom and dad held strong. And what they ended up seeing was he was able to start managing this. Adam was able to see that he could start to manage these things, because when he went to his parents to try to make him feel better when he felt uncomfortable, they were strong and they modeled that they are going to allow him to figure out he can handle this situation. And then what ended up happening from there was he ended up building up more confidence to be able to address other areas of anxiety, other areas of accommodation that mom and dad were engaging in with him. But that's sort of, in a nutshell, if you will, how the therapeutic modality works. So I think that was the last slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I am going to go ahead and stop the audio only recording.